We're going to move into the harvest phase. So this is a reminder of what you're doing in the harvest, and as we've done before, you have an opportunity. This is where your Post-it notes become important in particular. So you have an opportunity to capture something personally with a small Post-it note. You're going to be moving toward a takeaway for the table. You're now distilling all this conversation, looking at everything that's kind of accumulated in the center of the table, and you're thinking about what's the thing you want to put up, you want to share, you want to take away. It might be about the process, it might be about the content, it might be some seed for future action. We'll give you 15 minutes to talk about that at your table, then we'll get some reports from you as we've done before, and then that'll give you just a few more minutes at the end before we wrap this World Cafe for you to finish your table's thought, and then we'll get those up on the board. Yes, and Francis did say, and lunch, but that will come.
Awesome, thank you. Apparently I drew the short straw for my table, so I'll go ahead and take this one first. My group very much enjoyed this, and one of the things we came away from it was we could ask a bigger question of how can intergenerational collaboration and communication change the very world we live in. Some of the things that we were discussing at our table, because we have some intergenerational connectedness, was finding a way for this younger generation. The youth is so technologically savvy, and whether it's selfies and Facebook or changing the world through computers and robotics, but finding a way to blend that at a table through collaboration with the older generations that are so wise, that we look back upon for wisdom, and having the ability to teach this younger generation the history of the process, because we know so much of us are told at a young age, if you do not study history, you're doomed to repeat it. So that was what we gathered from that. So thank you so much.
That's going to appear on their green sheet that they're going to put on the board.
Hello. Yeah, okay. So we kind of centered our discussion around the importance of conversation. Obviously, we can see there's a lot of great thought going on. I know for myself, this has been a good reminder that there are other people fighting the good fight and making good conversation that's long-lasting. So something that we really centered on was the importance of being uncomfortable with what's going on around you, and that is a very important catalyst to getting people involved and wanting to make change. But in order to do that, you really have to facilitate a safe space where people do feel comfortable having constructive conversation, because that can be something people are very nervous about, and that is a great way to ultimately kind of create a community that is focused on making a constructive difference. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead.
You sure?
Yep.
Yeah. Sure.
So the one recurring problem we had is what I'm calling the problem of the bishops, where there's those people who are the anointed ones who have all the answers, and then there's all of us sinners. And you can secularize it at your leisure. And what we see is that it's basically there's the elites who claim to have the answers and know, and then there's the rest of the residents and citizenry. And so we thought I've identified three kind of ways to respond, and one is to emphasize true partnerships. So it's this sort of idea that we had from one of the earlier talks, that we need to solve things together as opposed to having one set of teams. The second one is that communicating information both ways is really important, and emphasizing quality. So we talked about whether an open mic like this is good or bad. There was not a consensus on that, but finding ways that go in the other direction so that
Speaking of communication,
I guess I'm done.
you spoke the $50 word or whatever it was that Groucho Marx used to do.
Sort of in the same vein, we and a lot of what's already been talked about was also on our list. Rethinking the institutional structures that create barriers for civic engagement. So, we talked about how hard it is if we have folks that are elected officials that they have a hard time communicating with. There's not that back and forth with the community. So why can't we get more of the community to run for office? But there are barriers to that, right? Of course, there's finances, there's, all the things, all the paperwork, everything you have to do in order to run. Or, even small things like if you want to attend a public meeting, don't have it in the middle of the day and provide childcare, So just things like that are really just policy or institutional barriers that we sort of need to rethink when we think about how the government works in order to engage its citizenry.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. We did a bunch of stuff. And I think we have it down here. And I think if I talk about it as our group started, we talked about on an individual level and how we connect with one another, have a sense of empathy and compassion, and that builds the authenticity. And then we moved to talking about, well, what do you do in groups? And it's about networking groups. And then we talked about, well, how did then you scale that up? And our friend here talked about the burning issues, and then what creates the tipping point for us to make the change. Now, I'm a proponent of these World Cafe Circles. I think they can be scaled to do that. And then the notion of co-creating a vision for change. And then we didn't talk about it in any depth, but we talked about the use of technology, because I heard someone at the table say they used what you were doing. With the technology, live streaming something on social media, and then that being a way that causes a change to happen. And then I think the final thing worth mentioning is the whole notion of building a community and how people find a community when we don't have communities in our neighborhoods, like many of us grew up having that sense of community in our neighborhood. So how do we do that now? That's it. Drop the mic.
All right. Oh, you're welcome. And so we echoed a number of those same themes as well, with some examples and some additional language to accompany those themes. Community voice is very pertinent because the community have things to say. They can tell us what they need very succinctly and very specifically if we listen and include community members in the conversation. One of the themes that came up was think globally but act locally. Look at other examples of what's happening not only here in Florida, not just the United States, but across the world. There are solutions being had and being done, but it may not be here, but it doesn't mean it's not being done someplace else and being done well. And so we can learn from that and translate that information and translate those initiatives for scalability, in addition to and also for advanced or expanded scope of learning. Community colleges are well positioned to do that because we are more open, and so we can really help to address those free flow of ideas and partnering with not only community agencies, but community organizations and neighborhoods in particular. When neighborhoods see that their colleges and their institutions are actually wanting to partner with them, it really helps them to stand up in their strength. And in their context, and knowing that they have that partnership of support. And then the whole notion of going just passion, and passion not passion with a purpose, though. So the continuum of passion to persistence, to innovation, to sustainability, as a part of preparing to scale up. So that it has purpose and it's on a continuum, and it promotes action. And then Ashoka was another theme that was also mentioned as well in terms of social entrepreneurship. entrepreneurship in terms of helping people to come together and really engage them and to increase their own social and economic agency. And then lastly, I just said the word crowd. And the reason why I said that is because you hear so much on social media about crowdfunding and how that mechanism is used to help raise money, but the whole idea of crowd thinking and people coming together in a targeted way on social media so that they can think and exchange and share ideas and give feedback to each other and actually come together and support those ideas of people, similar to an incubator, the social incubator or economic incubators that we've had. There are not a lot of them, but we can do the incubator idea and using social media to do that, to bring the resources and hopefully funding and resources that's needed to help us scale up an idea.
Thank you. We can take one more. One more. I think this gentleman here had his hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, good. So just looking at starting with the bigger questions, I think it's important, we talked about how it's important to look at the bigger picture, and people have been using sort of cliches, and I'll throw one in. You know, the French say, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. You know, the more things change, the more they remain the same. And we have to be careful that we lose sight of that, or be overtaken by the past. Somebody talked about if you don't read history, it can repeat itself. So that was one reflection. But then getting into tactics, you know, look for the small things that you can actually work with and improve. And sometimes the small things you can link up with something else and improve so that you're looking for the tricycle and not the jet. Another cliche is don't try to boil the ocean. You know. And then moving forward, modeling this form of conversation in our own work and using new language. And then finally, people must feel safe, respected, and sometimes professional facilitators or tactics like the ones we've discussed here could be most helpful in moving the needle.
Thank you.
So hold the mic because I want to send it back to someone. All the things you're saying are just so fascinating. I'm surprised at just the level of the type of things that you're coming up with. But I heard some terms that I just want to make sure we understand. I'm fascinated by the idea of the tipping point at which there will be change. So I wonder if you could give the mic to that tape and someone just say what that, sort of just what that statement means.
There may be two definitions here, but you're familiar with the young man who wrote the book Tipping Point. But for me, it's at what point are people, if we're talking about big change, at what point are people so dissatisfied that they're willing to take action?
Okay, great point.
And if that's tips, and that's about change.
Right, and if that's the point, how do we move that so that it doesn't take as long, or it doesn't take as much work? How do you move the tipping point to make it a shorter time?
You would ask that question.
I would ask that question.
I have lots of answers for it. But we have somebody here who has direct experience doing it in real time.
We're not going to know. I know Sharon Joe. We're not going to do that. We don't have time. We're going to make you late for lunch. But I would suggest that people talk with, if you're interested in more, and I want to talk with her more about what do you mean by that tipping point. I said that affectionately about Sharon Joy. We know each other. I heard an expression over here too. Carl, you wrote it down. It was active what? Just say a word about what that means. Very
Activist
short word.
philanthropy. Yeah, I'm putting two things together here. We talked about philanthropy typically is expressed by someone, at least at the foundation level, at the funding level, where somebody submits a proposal to the funder, we review it, we score it, and then you get a check in the mail. The activist philanthropist, we're talking about folks where you are alongside the philanthropic institution, or you as a philanthropist are far more engaged specifically in the work while also funding it. In the housing space, for example, in the affordable housing, you may be funding the research on the affordable, but you're also an activist on the picket lines, in the protests, in the sit-ins regarding the issues affecting affordable housing. So that's an activist position on philanthropy.
Great. Thank you.
So we are here just to take, yeah, thank you. We are here now to take that last minute or two for each of your tables to say, okay, what is that that's going on your big sheet to go up on the board? You may have something individual and personal you want to put up on using the small Post-its. Once you've done that, a request, please move things aside, clear some space so we can take the papers and things off your table so that you can come back and bring lunch. Go get your, take your quick break. Lunch is ready for you, and then we're going to have a wonderful awards ceremony.